Let's talk to a man who knows a darn sight more than most of our MPs do about this issue, and that's Ralph Schoellhammer. He's an Austrian economist and political theorist at Webster University in Vienna. Good morning to you, Ralph.
Good morning, Julia. Fantastic to be on with you again.
Lovely to be on with you. Well, I mean, frankly, by popular demand, the audience loved you last time, and I said to you, it's great to get you back on. And I didn't think the opportunity would come so soon and would be such a positive opportunity because, as many of our callers and others are saying, there appears to be some sanity creeping back into the room on this issue.
Well, I mean, I don't want to pour cold water on this. Oh,
don't ruin my morning.
But let me put it this way. If you're about to drive over a cliff, it's not enough to reduce speed. You actually have to change course. So, and I think what we are seeing here is more the reduction of speed is not changing course. And if you look at it, and we talked about this a little bit off camera before, I mean, there will be significant legal hurdles to this all. At the end of the day, right, the Climate Change Act needs to be repealed. I mean, this is what it comes down to, right? The British government, I mean, this is just as a quick note on this as well. I mean, wasn't that one of the reasons why you had Brexit? Kind of to be an independent sovereign nation again. And so this applies here as well. You need to get control back over your own energy policy.
But explain the Climate Change Act, because this is one of the worries I've got, which is actually he can delay all of this, and a delay is better than bringing it in sooner. But I'm with you. What I'd like is to abandon all these policies. But there is an issue with the Climate Change Act, which has enshrined all of these commitments in law. So what's the impact of that on government policy?
Well, that's the thing, right? Rishi Sunak can announce that all the changes that he would like to make, but he will be dragged into court. And the only way to avoid this if you actually repeal this mistaken act. Now, let me be clear. We have an example where this has happened, and that's the Canadian province of Ontario, right? They tried the same thing. They called it the Green Energy Act. And it was just as much a failure as the Climate Change Act here or the energy transition in Germany. So it's not that we have danced this dance before. Yeah. Like the media doesn't report a lot on it, but none of this is new. And we know what the right course would be, and we can talk about this in a second.
But in terms of the Climate Change Act, the legal aspects there, any organisation, and we know there's billions of pounds going into funding for these organisations, the Greenpeace's, Extinction Rebellion, and all these other organisations. They can stop pretty much the building of any power station, any railway line, any airport expansion. They can stop pretty much anything on the basis that it doesn't align with the net zero pledge, which is, whatever the delay is, still set in legal stone.
Well, let me say two things, because this is something the British people must know. You might as well call the Climate Change Act the China Subsidies Act, because everything that they support, electric vehicles, batteries, wind, solar, the supply chains for all these products are 90% in Chinese hands. So you basically deindustrialize Great Britain, you destroy the manufacturing base in Great Britain, and shift taxpayer money to the Chinese Communist Party. How in the world is that a policy that benefits British people? I know we constantly hear from the critics now, Sunak, that these new future industries, they will bring green jobs, they bring additional wealth, but it's all going to happen in the future. You know how they sound? They sound like the old communists in the 80s in the Soviet Union that said, we are that close to communist utopia. Yeah. It just takes a couple of years more. And this is the same thing now. We cannot compete in the renewable sector with the Chinese because the Chinese use fossil fuels to produce renewables. And we refuse fossil fuels, but think we can build cheaper renewables. This is not going to happen. People must understand wind turbines, photovoltaic, batteries are extremely energy intensive industries. This is why the Chinese continue to build coal. They continue to build nuclear. The point is, Britain must get serious. You guys have a fantastic manufacturing base. You have a fantastic industrial base, but you need to learn that the future, the backbone of the modern economy is still fossil fuels. Yeah. You cannot just end it with a stroke of a pen.
No, but this is the key thing, is when I talk to MPs, you know, the people who make these decisions in our parliament, they don't know that. They genuinely think that on some days we're producing, 60% of our power from wind and solar. They don't realise it's 6% because that can only produce electricity, and electricity is never more than 20% or so of our power consumption. Most MPs, most commentators on this issue, I find actually even most environmentalists on this issue, don't know some of the most basic facts about what our economy is based on.
No, that is absolutely correct. And I think this is, of course, also an educational problem. Let me give you one quick example that most people, again, I think don't know. We produce 6,000 different products of daily use from oil and natural gas. And we're not just talking about gasoline and diesel. We're also talking about antibiotics. We're talking about antibacterials. We talk about plastic that's essential for the healthcare system. So all of these things need these kind of fossil fuels. And if you abandon them, the price for them will go up. Britain already has a problem with the national healthcare system. Can you imagine what's going to happen if you have an artificially created shortage in the petrochemical industry? What's that going to do to the prices of healthcare? Yeah. And we see all this happening. And let me say one more thing, again, for the British people to understand. Right? We don't put crude oil into our cars. We put stuff we distillate, and we put stuff out of refineries in our cars. Do you know when the British built the last refinery? In the 1960s. 3 of the 6 running British refineries were built in the 1920s. So we don't invest too much in fossil fuels. We invest way, way too little in fossil fuels. And let me be clear, just one last point. We will see now an increase in food prices. Why? Because diesel prices go up. If you're a farmer, right, you cannot run your business without diesel, without fertilizer. If you have a transportation company, you cannot bring food to the supermarket without diesel. So we are having an ever worsening cost of living crisis. And I think politicians are entirely oblivious to it.
Yeah, I mean, they're entirely oblivious. Well, voters aren't, because they're feeling it and they're going to vote with their feet on this. But we haven't really had a choice on this. And it's fascinating because, I know you've written a lot about what's going on in the German economy as well. And the reason why they'd moved, for instance, to delay the ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel cars was because the German all-powerful, multi-billion-pound car industry went, this is insane. We can't do this. And we know even on the forecourts of garages now, they can't sell electric vehicles because people have realised they cost a fortune and they're not going to be as reliable to run. And, it's just not going to work for most people. And this is the thing. Reality is sort of, staring in the faces of the voters. But we need to have a proper and clear political choice on this. But do you think it's a big issue? When Sunak says he's going to water them down, but he's still committed to these issues. And we're going to talk to the Home Secretary, Scoellhammer Brewer, in about half an hour's time. And she's been saying this morning, we won't save the planet by bankrupting the British people. That's all very well. But they're still on paper and voice saying they're committed to these policies. We need politicians to admit these were insane policies. They were unachievable. They were unaffordable. They were undesirable. They'll make absolutely virtually zero contribution to any concept of saving the planet. And they need to be honest with us about that, don't they?
No, I completely agree. And it's not just a matter of honesty. It's I think, telling the people what is the goal, what is supposedly the obligation of a government. And I would argue that ensuring the wealth and prosperity of its people must always be the primary goal. And no policy, especially a ludicrous policy that claims to save the planet, should take precedence over this. Listen, I always say this, and I want this also to be very clear. The energy transition will happen. It's inevitable, but it's not imminent, and you cannot force it. The modern economy is still a fossil fuel-based economy, and this is not going to change quickly. As you said before, absolutely correctly, so far renewables only replace electricity if they could, right? Because they're intermittent, they're unreliable, all these different kind of things. And something else that politicians tend to forget, people will not put up with this. At some point, what we are experiencing in the battle of physics versus platitudes, physics are undefeated, and politicians will find this out very, very soon.
Absolutely. Great to talk to you again. Thank you very much indeed, Ralph Schoellhammer. He's an Austrian economist who knows damn sight more about our energy and our economy than most of our politicians. I think that's blatantly obvious there. 8:40.